Good morning, everybody. I'm Kathleen Fitzpatrick, the Senior Program Manager for NAEP. Welcome to the table talk for Make the Future, Connecting Girls to Manufacturing. Today we are excited to have our guest, Kevin Scott from NAM. And before we get started with Kevin's presentation, I'd like to just tell you a little bit of background about the project. The Make the Future project is a project funded by Toyota. We have been tasked with engaging educators and recruiters in a network where they can learn and share best practices to increase participation in advanced manufacturing pathways. NAEP is a national nonprofit that works with educators to increase participation in non-traditional careers, so this fits really well with our wheelhouse. As you know, advanced manufacturing faces a serious gap, and we are working really hard to try to increase the number of girls who are interested in this career path. This project has engaged with partners in 7 states: Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, Missouri, Texas, and West Virginia. And we are working with pilot educational institutions to work with us on this project. We are hoping to work with them and work with you all to enrich our existing relationships and establish new ways to engage and recruit female students in building tomorrow's advanced manufacturing workforce. As you may know, we've been working on developing a suite of tools and resources, and here is a slide showing the resources that we have available for you, available on our learning management system. We will talk a little bit more about the learning management system at the end of this presentation. Our 9 best practices is what these table talks have been focused on. We are today going to be talking about providing repeated exposure to advanced manufacturing careers, table talk best practice number 5. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kevin Scott. Kevin is the Senior Director for Youth Engagement and Education at the Manufacturing Institute, the education and workforce partner of the National Association of Manufacturers, or NAM. In this role, Kevin raises awareness on careers in manufacturing for educators, students, and other stakeholders to match career needs with future opportunities. Kevin oversees the Manufacturing Institute's youth outreach efforts, including Manufacturing Day and Dream It, Do It Network. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kevin. Welcome,
Great.
Kevin. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you all taking the time to watch this and listen to me talk for a little while. My background, very briefly, before I came to the Manufacturing Institute, was working with other educational nonprofits, as well as I spent 7 years in 7th grade. So that was a very eye-opening experience. I loved the middle school years and certainly bring that expertise with me pretty much wherever I go. So I know that there is certainly a need for opening the eyes of a lot of students to the career opportunities that are out there beyond, the traditional opportunities that they may know from their families or their parents or their teachers or others in their lives. And this is certainly, I think, an exciting time to be even thinking about manufacturing or thinking about careers in STEM because there are so many opportunities and things are evolving and changing so quickly. So I appreciate you taking the time. It's a little bit about me. I'll tell you a little bit about the National Association of Manufacturers. If you want to hit the next slide, Kathleen. And I will just spend a minute or so giving an outline of what the 2 organizations are. As you see on the slide, the National Association of Manufacturers is the largest manufacturing association in the U.S., representing all different sizes companies in all different states, every state, millions of folks in all different walks of life. So manufacturing really does encompass a lot of different industries. A lot of times we have sort of a thought of what manufacturing is, and I'll get to that in a second. But just for your awareness, reaches, different communities, but also different topics. So the National Association of Manufacturers focuses on the work that is done In Washington, of course, focuses on trade, immigration policy, different regulations and taxes. Of course, it's a pretty complicated mix of topics, but we'll skip along to the next slide and talk a little bit about how the Manufacturing Institute then fits in with the National Association of Manufacturers. So as Kathleen pointed out, the MI, or Manufacturing Institute, is the workforce and education partner of the National Association of Manufacturers. So we work in concert with them on a lot of different issues, but we really are focusing on the workforce and trying to identify what are the best practices or what are the things that are working to educate and excite and empower men, women, youth, of course, going down into middle school and high schools, community colleges, and really running the gamut. So I'll ask you on the phone or on the computer right now, if you think about, just for a few seconds, what's the first word or two that comes to your mind when you think about manufacturing. You feel free to type that into the chat box, or if you want to repeat it out loud. I can't hear you, but I can trust that some of the words might come up. So when we think about what the Institute does, is we have a variety of different programs that we'll go over here in the next few minutes to talk about how to excite the youth, how to educate not only kids, but parents, teachers, counselors, really anybody who is impactful in a kid or a student's life. And that may include, somebody who's even down into the 4th or 5th grade. There's a lot of studies out there about when young girls decide whether or not they're going to be good at math, so to speak. And that decision oftentimes is scary because it's very, very young. So some of the topics and some of the challenges that we face really go down into, children that are, 10 years old or even younger. So if you had a thought, if Kathleen, if I could ask you to kind of jump in and
Certainly.
tell me some of the words that came to mind.
So Making the Future, which is the name of our project here. Mimi said robots. A couple other
Yeah.
comments. Not a lot of women in these careers. Many misconceptions. Often people think it's dirty and hands-on machining. Fenella said parts. Mimi
Yeah.
said machine shop, grease and oil, dirty. So those are some of the comments.
Great. You fell right into my trap. So that is exactly what I was expecting to hear, and certainly something that we have heard all the time. If you want to hit to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the problem that we're facing. So yeah, so dirty, dark, and dangerous is sort of the 3 Ds that we often hear. And just to sort of set the table a little bit, there's a crisis right now in the workforce, and a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today in just a few minutes are really talking about the challenges that companies face, because there is this perception issue that they have of, what we consider our grandfather's manufacturing plant, or what it was like when we see our old, for me at least, I can speak from experience, it was the old textbook that I would use when I was a teacher. I taught history, and we would talk about the Industrial Revolution, and you see these giant machines and, scary things. And of course, there were a lot of reasons why it was dirty, dark, and dangerous and scary back then, but things have changed quite a bit. And things have changed really in the last probably 10 years, just as much as the last, 50. So there's a lot of changes and advancement. So if you hit the next slide, we'll get into some of the statistics and some of the realities of what we're facing. So I'll get through these relatively quickly, but this is all brand new information, so I thought it was worth sharing. We do a quarterly survey of manufacturers, and the first quarter of 2019 just wrapped up. So these numbers are really kind of fresh. But you can see the biggest challenge that companies are facing is attracting and retaining a quality workforce. In fact, that's much larger than a lot of the other big issues you hear about on the news, or you read about, online, or gets on, TV news or wherever. So of course, healthcare and other, trade and other things are on this list, but you can see by a large percentage point that attracting and retaining that quality workforce is really paramount. So there are estimates now that we have about 500,000 jobs, about 450,000 jobs that are open in the manufacturing sector alone. And so these are jobs that companies really want to fill. They're not necessarily all careers that require a college education. In fact, a lot of them are careers that start out either in a community college or even a high school setting where it's like an earn and learn model. And those are, the kinds of people that manufacturers want to hire, because then they can train and retrain and kind of carry them along through their career and make it an interesting journey of a career. And it's not just doing the same repetitive motion, which I think a lot of people assume when they think about manufacturing. So if you want to jump to the next slide, we'll get into a little bit more details. This is an outlook basically saying the respondents who said that their current business is positive or very positive. So when asked, what do you think of the future for your company, you can see these outcomes are pretty high. They're very excited about the future. That goes along, of course, with a lot of other economic factors. But when asking companies in the last 2 years or so, they've hovered right around the 90% positive going into the first quarter of this year, with a little bounce back after a slight dip there at the fourth quarter of 2018. So they continue to grow and hire, and they continue, as you saw on the last slide, to need those trained employees. If you want to hit the next one, we got a couple more economic indicators here. So this one, the reason I picked this one up is just really to show you the difference. A lot of times when we think of manufacturers, we think of these giant companies, but in fact, most of the companies in the U.S. are smaller sized and medium sized. So these are in your community. A lot of times they're sort of invisible in communities. They're in an industrial park, or they're somewhere where not a lot of people are high traffic, but they are providing good jobs and like I said, creative opportunities for young employees and the students. When I think about the students today in high school, even my own son, I think in about 5 or 6 years he's going to be out in the workforce, and that's not really a terribly long time. So when you take a look at some of these and you think about the growth and some of the optimism that they have, we hope that, of course, that continues, but that really could impact, the high school senior that's out there right now. So all of this is sort of setting the table. If you want to go to the next slide, setting the table for the problem and what a lot of these manufacturers are doing to try to address those, and what the Manufacturing Institute is also doing. So you can see that a couple more statistics here about the talent shortage and the number of manufacturers willing to pay more. One of the statistics that we talk about a lot is manufacturing careers often pay better than the average career numbers that you see. So it's somewhere in the $80,000 range when you include benefits and other, attributes, 401ks, and all of those other components of a career. So in the $80,000 range as an average, you can see that there would obviously be a lot of room to grow ahead of that, and that's exciting if you're talking to a student who is perhaps thinking about going into a 4-year program that's going to have a large a debt component where they're going to have to take out a whole bunch of student loans. So a manufacturing career offers some solutions to that problem. So if we go to the next slide, and I promise this is the last one with any stats, or at least stats like this. So this is just sort of telling you a little bit about who are the people that impact the career. So you see down on the corner there, American support manufacturing job creation. So manufacturing usually does have I don't want to say a stigma to it, but we think of these jobs sometimes as one kind of job, but the reality is that it crosses over a vast number of career paths. It could be anything, of course, dealing with the STEM careers, but we have the engineers, we have people that are working to maintain or work on equipment. We have a lot of opportunities in these new manufacturing, advanced manufacturing careers that are extremely clean. In fact, a lot of them look like they're creating, like microchips or something that's super high tech. In fact, most of that dark, dirty, and dangerous mentality is really out the window when you see it firsthand. So I'll just leave this up here for one more second, because there is this technological shift that's happening, and automation is often taking some of those dark, dirty, and dangerous components out of the manufacturing career, and what it's doing is allowing them to work alongside. So you mentioned robots was one of the words that somebody mentioned, and yes, of course, robots are there, and robots are often taking out those mundane jobs or the jobs that are dangerous. But somebody has to maintain that robot. Somebody has to design the robot. Somebody has to be sure that it is doing what it's supposed to be doing and operating effectively and efficiently and all of those other components of working with robots. So it's kind of sort of a joke around here that they're not taking over, but we will have to coexist in a lot of ways with the high-tech career that robots bring and all the solutions that they bring along with them. So if we go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about the solution. Go ahead and hit the next one, Kathleen. So the solution is really a lot of different components, and I wanted to show a quick video here about what some of these jobs might look like. I'll let the video speak for itself, and then we'll come back in a minute or two and talk a little bit more.
Kathleen, we can't see or hear the video.
Okay.
That's okay.
Apologize.
That's okay. I could see it for some reason, but if others can't, then it's not really worth it.
Okay. My
we can always
apologies.
That's okay. We were trying something new, and I said we can do this, and Kathleen said sure we can, and we tried it, and it worked on our test, of course. But that's just how things go sometimes.
Kevin, if you want, we could take this link and just go watch it quickly in another window.
Sure. It's 90 seconds, so it really is very quick. If you want to go ahead and do that.
It is in the LinkedIn. It's in the material section of the training room. Okay, we are back and getting feedback that folks are done watching the videos. So
great. So I will just say that's a small taste of what is out there. The creators wanted. It was sort of our theme for the recent manufacturing tour, which if you go to the main page later, that's just creatorswanted.org. You'll see a lot of references to that tour where a bunch of our executive team and other members of NAM and other just industry people, let's say, went around to 4 or 5 different states and different kinds of manufacturing facilities and high schools and community colleges, and got to see firsthand some of the exciting things that are happening around the country. And so there's some information there that's there today. If you were to go there 2 weeks from now in the middle of April, or may not be there anymore because they're just coming off of that tour a week or two ago. But there's also, I think, what's more interesting, and that's always there, are some different videos about different paths that people have taken to get the career that they are in manufacturing. So you'll see women, you'll see recent immigrants, you'll see young people, older people. You'll see a really wide variety of folks that are working in careers in manufacturing. So we often get caught in the wormhole of YouTube and getting stuck walking down and finding out that half an hour later you've lost, that part of your life that you can never get back again. But I would encourage you to take a look at the Creators Wanted page and take that trip just to see what some of the different avenues are. Go ahead, sorry.
Kevin, I was just going to say, Mimi made a comment, said, love the video, great images and stories and testimonials. Really appreciate the diversity too.
Great. Yeah, that's terrific. And I find it hard for me not to mention my own two kids, but they are middle and high schoolers, and I think they watch more YouTube than anything else in the world. The idea of just watching TV is kind of foreign to them because they're always just watching different YouTube videos. So if we can get a couple of hundred kids to check out the Creators Wanted page, or if you're working with students and point them in that direction, especially those who are really unsure about what they want to do or just want to see what some of these look like firsthand, I think it's a great site and a great opportunity to showcase some of the things going on. Okay, if you want to go ahead and hit the next slide, we'll kind of quickly talk about the Manufacturing Institute. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about each of these briefly because the Manufacturing Institute has a bunch of different components that we're constantly trying to increase the awareness and the perception, change that perception. So Here's Make America is a veterans program for those coming out of the service and working in manufacturing. So they take a series of classes over a relatively short period of time. Right now we are in 3 different bases. We're about to expand to a 4th base in North Carolina. And I encourage you, if you're interested, you can take a look at that program. These are really all walks of life within the military. So we have everything from officers and higher ups all the way, throughout all of the different careers in the military. And a lot of times the skills that manufacturers are looking for, really any employer is looking for, translates really well from the HEROES program because, things like showing up on time and being responsible and being able to, talk to a group of people, all those little things that we sort of take for granted, of course, manufacturers want. So if you want to kick it to the next slide, it goes over a little bit more about this. And we're hoping that this program expands over time. Like I said, it started out just as 1 base a year ago. Now we're up to 4 bases, and we expect that to increase over the next couple of years because there is such a large number of military coming out of service. And of course, many of those military are women that are serving, as well as, of course, spouses could also benefit from a career in manufacturing. If you go to the next slide, we'll get you right into Step Ahead, which I think might appeal to this audience a little bit more. So Step Ahead is basically our women's program focused on trying to increase the number of women that are in manufacturing. You'll see the stat on the slide, about 29% are in the workforce. And so when you talk about sort of an underutilized population, this is a classic example. So the Step Ahead Awards really were created just a few years ago to showcase women in manufacturing. So STEP, the P is for production, so science, technology, engineering, production, is really focused on the manufacturing sector and giving sort of established women in their careers a chance to give back by being a mentor. So every year we showcase 100 women at the STEP Award, and then 30 under 30, so like an emerging leader class of 30 younger women that will be sort of mentees to the others. And you can see over 800 women have now participated in that. We have a new batch. Very excited to announce via press release. We just announced a few of them, and then we'll do the full rollout coming in April of this year. So just a little over a month away. We'll have a big gala here in Washington, D.C., and then that they will be incorporated into a lot of different programming elements. If you go to the next slide, you'll see Step Forward, which is our program that goes throughout the year. So this is the Institute's larger initiative that goes around the country to different sites. And you can see there It really is educating manufacturers and attracting women employees throughout this community-based engagement. So there's an online community. We go to certain sites where there are some really great things happening. You can see on the left side there where we were, and then where we've been. We just had an event last week down in Southern Virginia. And just to kind of hit a key statistic here, so women today account for less than a third of the manufacturers, despite half of all workers. So if you use those numbers alone to try to get more girls interested, we're trying to inspire the next generation of girls to show what they can do through manufacturing. It's a gender gap, it's a skills gap, it's really a lot of different components come together here, and if we can get more young women interested in careers in manufacturing, I think it would solve a lot of the problems, both companies and a lot of the issues that, when we hear about, girls and stereotyping, and like I said a few minutes ago about, when they decide that they're not good at math, for example, we can change some of those things. I think that's a societal change that would benefit all of us. So those are a couple key components with the step ahead and step forward. If you want to go to the next slide, Kathleen.
Yes, before we jump ahead, there was a question about whether or not some of these women are available to serve as role models or guest speakers or mentors for schools in their communities.
Sure, yes. That is something we can follow up afterwards, and I can certainly make the connection if you have somebody that is, when we have I can get the full list of honorees, whether it's this year's or last year's, then I'm sure we can make that connection.
Okay.
Yeah, so the next slide really just talks a little bit about the sort of continuum of how we attract, train, and retain for careers in manufacturers. You can see on the left side there some kids in some T-shirts, and those are the Dream It Do It program is a more local program that's like a state-based. Those sometimes they're like a chamber of commerce at the state level, and they will work to go into schools and work with manufacturers and other partners to showcase some of these careers and get kids really in there and get their hands on a lot of the machines or into the plant to see what it really looks like. If you want to go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of the other things that influence careers. You can see parents and their own interests, of course, are the top two. I can speak from experience. You hear a lot of times about, well, my dad was an accountant, so I went into accounting, or my dad was a lawyer, so I became a lawyer. So we know parents are a huge influencer on a kid's careers. And the same thing is true in manufacturing, of course. If they see, a life of manufacturers, then that, of course, jumps you into that career, and you know what it's like, and it's comfortable and it's safe. But we know that there's also a lot of opportunities. And that's why we do things like Manufacturing Day. So if you go to the next slide, dive right into Manufacturing Day. So this is a one-day occurrence that happens every year. It's been around for about, I think, 7 or 8 years now. And the statistics are hard to ignore because last year we had, all of these events and all of these students all around the country, in Canada and Mexico as well. And what that affords, the kids an opportunity to see what's going on firsthand in their community. So in many cases, you're not traveling very far to get to one of these activities. So on our website, you can register either as a school or as a community partner. For example, if you were, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, or any other group, you could work with a local company. So the companies put their information up, and then schools and other entities put their information up, and it's sort of, you can create like a matchmaker situation. Depending on your community and the availability. Some companies have literally hundreds of students come in at once. Some start out small and just have a dozen or so the first year. But with 2,700 different events, we obviously don't get involved in every single one of them. But we are, of course, sort of the gatekeepers of the information and trying to make those matches. If you want to go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about the results. So afterwards, we ask the students, we ask the parents, we ask really anybody who's involved about their career thoughts regarding manufacturing, and these are some of the numbers. So you can see, 82% are more convinced that a manufacturing career provides something that's interesting and rewarding. So there is an impact. This is, of course, a long tail to the impact. So if you had a group of middle schoolers, it would be 10 years before we know if they actually do go into a career in manufacturing. High schoolers are a little bit shorter, but we're hopeful that these kinds of events and the sort of the drumbeat of, over and over again. So this is an annual event. It doesn't always, most companies try to do it on that first Friday of October, although we do events all throughout the month and really, in fact, throughout the year. So the more attention we can get and the more continued views we can get, whether that's through a career day at a high school or a college fair, there's lots of different ways to get that message out there, and Manufacturing Day is one of many. So if you go to the next slide, you'll talk a little bit about some of the things I just went over, just really trying to get manufacturers involved. There are so many companies out there that are willing to do this. Some take different focal points. So some might focus just on girls, for example, or might work with a younger group of students, which would obviously be a different day. If you were setting up something for elementary, that would be very different than it would be for, let's say, a high school physics class. If you want to go to the next slide. All right. Buzz through these last few here, talking about different types of events. And as I said, job fairs, career fairs, college fairs, these are all really good opportunities to showcase what different companies are doing. A lot of the challenges, and I can speak as a parent on this one, but a lot of the challenges come from parents, because parents have an idea, just like we all did when we started out the conversation about what these careers might look like. They are vastly different than I think a lot of the perceptions that we have. And I think once parents start to see that firsthand, they will understand that a little bit better as well. And if you want to go to the next slide, this is just, again, reiterating sort of the attract, train, and retain. We're trying to help really everybody from those early elementary all the way up to secondary, post high school, to get involved and check out what opportunities are there. So the last slide just has my contact information. We'll leave that up for a minute, and I'm happy to answer any questions via email at any time. If you are watching this later and something came up, I'd be happy to respond and share other information with you.
Kevin, there's a couple comments or questions. So one having to do with the Heroes Make America Veterans Program. So one question was, do you recruit their children while you're recruiting the vets?
I don't think we recruit their children. I think if I'm understanding the question is, are we asking those children to join the service while they're being?
No, I think the question is, do you take the opportunity as you're working with the vets to expose their children also to manufacturing as a possible career choice?
That's interesting. I don't know that it's deliberate. That's a great question, though. I'd have to do a little exploration on that. That's a good question. I'd have to follow up on.
Second comment, just the transfer of skills from the military is a great example of how people can transition into manufacturing at any stage in their career or education lifetime. So just a comment.
Yeah, and it is. I think, and I'll speak from my own example. I left the classroom, the traditional educational, teaching social studies all day long, to come to work for educational organizations such as the Institute here, and that was a career change. I think the generation that is working now, most of us have had multiple sort of paths. Maybe they're similar paths, but that transition can be made much more naturally than it once was. And my family history is not around manufacturing whatsoever, but I happen to have one of my family members did get in manufacturing sort of by accident. He's on the finance side of things. He's not on a plant floor, but clearly everything he does is around the products that they create and what they do. And I guess the bottom line is the manufacturing world is much bigger than building a car or building the table that I'm sitting in front of here, or any of the other things that are manufactured. There's just such a vast opportunity for kids to get involved and do different and creative and exciting things. I think that those transitions are natural, and for kids to see that, whether it's from the military to a career in manufacturing, or whether it's from teaching or being, any other career that's out there, it's worth an exploration.
Another question having to do with the Step Forward initiative is there a way for these sort of events to be connected with school events at the same time so that girls can network with these women who are already in manufacturing?
Yes, I think that the short answer is yes. In a forum like this, I don't want to get into too many details as far as how we would do that. We do partner with other groups, and I will just mention one as one example. But at that step ahead award ceremony I referenced, there will be several young women who entered a contest through the Boys and Girls Club of America, and they were they had to do an application, and they were awarded with this, and they'll come to the day with these other women who are in their careers, and sort of talk about what why they wanted to apply for this, and then be part of a panel conversation. That's just one example of how we can get the connection from students into their careers. And there are of those 800 women that I mentioned earlier, there are in, I can't say exactly how many states, but I would guess it's pretty close to every state. And we could probably make some ways to connect, girls in schools to those women who are in their careers.
Tied to that, Fenella asks how often it is that the Institute is in schools, and how do you decide which schools? Do you do anything with kids over the summer? If so, what and who?
Okay, I'll try to tackle all of those. So we don't always directly go into schools. We do go into schools through a partner, like even a company that we might work with. So the Institute doesn't have a direct connection to schools right now the way things are set up. That's where we have that Dream It, Do It network that I mentioned, where we would have a partner like a Chamber of Commerce or even a community college, and they are the ones that are talking directly to the two kids. So that sort of helps decide where we're going and what we're doing. We just don't have the staff or the reach to get into every single school. We might do something as part of a tour that's local, or we might do that as part of something like Manufacturing Day. The other question was something about camps or summer, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that is something we're actually we're interested in trying that. That's more of a pilot thing, just because we would want to test that out with some other partners and see how that might look. So that's something that's in the works for the summer coming up, but it's not on any kind of scale right now. Ideally, you would work with a community college for something like that, because again, when it comes to things like logistics and getting kids to and from, and do you serve them lunch and all of the other things that go along with that, we just don't have the staff for that right now. But we want to learn from those who are trying things like that, and with different groups that may be partnering with a company. So we can say, okay, well, this really worked well in, whatever, pick a state, Pennsylvania. So will that same model work somewhere else? And that's the kind of thing that we're keeping our eyes on.
Great. And tied to that question, along with the Dream It, Do It, I had a question about, do you have examples of activities that would simulate manufacturing for a classroom setting? So if you can't get kids into a manufacturing setting, how do you introduce them to manufacturing in the classroom?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So separate and unrelated to the Creators Wanted space, the page that we looked at a little while ago, there's another, you can just Google this. You just Google what's so cool about manufacturing. And there are multiple states where kids are doing these videos. So what's so cool about manufacturing, you'll get a couple of different options. I know one's in Pennsylvania, I believe one's in Connecticut, maybe a couple other states too, if I recall. But these are like video contests that companies will sponsor or other groups will help sponsor, and then the kids are going into manufacturing settings and showing their video and what they're doing. And that's a great way to sort of see it without getting out of the school and, taking a day out of class and everything else. I'd also, in a perfect world, I'd love to be able to say we're going to have a virtual tour or something that you could use, like a pair of, maybe not even the virtual reality goggles, but something a little lower tech than that you could just use your phone. that's on my wish list. I'm hoping that we can get something like that out there in the future. But at this point, that doesn't exist yet. But what's so cool about manufacturing might be a good sort of dipping your toe in.
What about teacher resources or actual classroom activities?
So we have some of those on our website, on the Manufacturing Institute website. And if you go into that Dream It, Do It section, there are some resources there that are public. And there are, really any STEM, if you were to find one of the STEM-related websites or STEM-related curriculum pieces, you could probably use that in a manufacturing setting. There are tons of this is what I also know from my former days as teaching is there are tons of resources out there, and you can really get stuck Googling things and finding out the hard way that you're wasted a lot of time. I would stick with there are also state level manufacturing associations. So pretty much every state has as opposed to the National Association of Manufacturers, there's also state resources. And a lot of times they have curriculum needs or ways to find lessons or resources for teachers that can help with careers in manufacturing.
Great. Anybody else have any final comments or questions? Oh, here's one. Do you do anything to educate parents and caregivers about manufacturing?
That's a great question. I think that's really where something like Manufacturing Day comes into play. So one other example I will give is we are working with the Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day Foundation, which is coming up in April. Every April they do a it's kind of like Manufacturing Day if you're not familiar with it, but basically employees bring their kids to work, and we're trying to partner with them to expand the reach of Manufacturing Day and help manufacturers bring kids in, and also parents just to be aware that there are opportunities there for a way to kind of educate the parents about, hey, there are these careers out there. It's worth exploring. I know that the Take Your Daughters and Sons to Work Day is something they have something like 30 million kids that come into work all across the country to different jobs. So they're not manufacturing specific, but even if we can raise the awareness of some of those 30 million to change, that perception and to raise the awareness for parents, I feel like that would be a big win. So we're going to work with them and some other groups as well, just to try to, get the parents a little bit more aware and see things firsthand.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to turn on my webcam. Oh, I think we have another question. One last one. Okay. Do you target people of color in any of your programming, given the gaps?
That's a really great question. So obviously the Step Forward is focused on women, and the Step Ahead program that is focused on women, but it is evolving. I think now we have a survey and the results. The other thing that if you can't tell by all the statistics I'm throwing around, the other piece of the Institute's work is around research. And so one of our research components was a partnership or working with Deloitte on diversity and inclusion. So we've done quite a bit of research there, and we know that there are tremendous opportunities in that arena as well. In fact, we just had a webinar the other day about diversity and inclusion and how companies are working with different groups and different partnerships to try to raise the number of people in manufacturing who are people of color, immigrants, of course. There's a lot of opportunity there, and I think that's something that we may not have a program devoted to it exactly like we have STEP right now, but I think that will evolve very soon into working with more people of color and programming on getting, kind of decreasing that gap as well.
So are you at a place where you have any best practices yet or examples of those who are doing it well, or are you still just collecting data?
Yeah, I think we're still in the collection phase. There are certainly companies that are doing it well that I would not want to say out loud just because I wouldn't want to single any one company out over anybody else. But there are certainly, some companies, and the webinar that I'm referring to, I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's available to anybody because it's on our our Manufacturing Institute community, which is the online platform. So I can loop back, Kathleen, maybe, and see if I can get the link to that to share.
That would be great, and we will send it out to those who are registered for this webinar. Thank you so much. Well, great information, Kevin, and as you know, we are all about manufacturing and love the work that you all are doing, and both with manufacturers as well as reaching out to students and educators. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And just a last couple slides from the team here. A reminder that we have our learning management system for advanced manufacturing pathways, Make the Future. Reminder to get on there. We're continuing to add new resources. We are going to be curating the videos that Kevin referred to earlier on this website so that folks have access to them easily. So if you haven't been using the learning management system, would encourage you to do so. And just a reminder that, you know, in addition to recognition from your organization, this project will make you better at your job, increase your professional network, and increase your knowledge about STEM equity and how to attract females to the programs that lead to advanced manufacturing. And with that, just want to thank you all for your attention and time today, and don't hesitate to reach out to myself or the team on this project with any comments or questions. Everyone have a great day, and again, thank you, Kevin, for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.